Hello everyone, my name is Mila, and I am 14 years old. All of my life, the good moments I had were always replaced by the bad, and the white always gradually turned into black. That's a normal thing, right? But the only reason for my suffering has always been my father, and I was finally able to break the cycle. You know, I don't think I ever really knew him. Mom and Dad were constantly breaking up and getting back together. This had already happened at least 4 times. My mom told me that they had been dating since high school. They both had violent tempers and they fought pretty often. But that was exactly what attracted them to each other. So after a brief breakup, they always started all over again. It wasn't a problem when they were young, but as they grew older, they had more responsibility and they shouldn't have behaved so recklessly. I'm talking about responsibility in the form of me. When I was born, my parents had a lot of problems. Soon afterward, my father left the family, and I was all alone with my mother. I saw my dad again when I was 5 years old. He came back to us as if nothing had happened, and we all began to live together. A couple of years later, they broke up again. I remember that time well. My mother and I had a hard time, but we managed everything together, and we were happy. A couple of years ago, he returned to the family, and I realized what the reason was for their constant bickering. My father had a lot of bad habits. He had problems with alcohol and gambling, and he only came back to his family because he needed help. It was disgusting, but it seemed that mother loved him no matter what he did, and was ready to forgive anything. And I didn't like that at all, because every time he lived with us, our lives became hell. My dad was completely uninterested in me and never loved me. He stayed at home all day and didn't show a bit of affection. For example, he thought that I was supposed to be cooking for him when I came home from school. And when I refused, he was always angry. I always looked forward to my mother's return from work, but when my father was at home, she also took little interest in me. It happened because Dad was a bad influence on her and tried to impose his way of life on her. And when you have a child, this lifestyle is completely inappropriate. Dad kept calling his friends and they would have parties at our house. My mom was into it too. So I was just sitting in my room by myself trying to do my homework and no one even tried to help me with it. Soon we began to lose our money because my father didn't work at all, but also because of my mom's bad habits. She started having problems at work and our lives were gradually getting worse. This led to more fights with my parents, and they broke up again. Honestly, I breathed a sigh of relief when he left. It meant that order would return to our lives, and we would be better off without him. And I was right. We spent a couple of months dealing with the aftermath of my father's arrival, and then everything went back to normal, and got even better. Mom had a new boyfriend. She had never had a relationship with anyone other than my dad, so I was just really happy. Andy was her colleague. He was a decent man, and he would have been a great match for my mother. I met him as soon as they started dating. Andy loved kids and was very happy to hang out with me. He was divorced because his former wife didn't want to have children, and he needed someone who he could love and care about. You know, I think every adult has a watch somewhere deep inside. And at a certain age, their alarm begins to go off and demand that they satisfy their parental instinct. Anyway, I was really glad Andy came into our lives. And I was even more pleased when they told me that they were getting married. Everything was perfect. They had a beautiful wedding, vows of love, white doves, and all that. Honestly, I even cried a couple of times because it was very touching. Then Andy moved in with us and we started living together. It was the happiest period of my life. Love, care, and order finally reigned in our house. It was the stability my mother and I always needed. And I finally had a real father who loved me. This went on for a year. And guess what? My biological father came back again. He showed up at the house early in the morning while we were having breakfast. Oh, it was a very awkward scene. He came with flowers and apologies and saw a strange man at the table. And he was very surprised when Andy introduced himself as my mom's husband. My father was clearly discouraged, and my mother quickly escorted him out of the house. I saw them talking outside the door. I bet it was a very awkward conversation. At that moment, I hoped my father realized that it was over and that he would never come back to us. But I was wrong, and he wasn't going to let it go. The very next day, I saw my father standing outside my school. He was waiting for me, and he wanted to talk. Dad asked me to help him get my mom back. He said he loved her, and he wanted to live with her for the rest of his life. Beautiful words, but I knew they weren't true, even if he meant it. They broke up a bunch of times, and each time, life with my father was just unbearable. I knew that he would only bring chaos and trouble into our lives, and I told him that my mother was happy now with another man, and that he had better stay away from our family. It was harsh, but it was true. Dad said that I would regret that I refused to help him, and left. That meant he was serious about getting my mom back, and I had to stop him from doing it. From that moment on, the race for my mom's love between my dad and Andy began. Mom had already gone back to Dad a few times, and I knew she could do it again, so I had to help Andy. It was pretty difficult because my father fought hard. He often waited for my mom on the way home from work, gave her gifts, and wanted to talk. One day, a courier brought flowers to our house with a note from Dad. I quickly threw out Dad's message and wrote a new one where it said, "With love, Andy." But my father was not far behind. One day, I heard Mom talking with Dad on the phone. And it wasn't a simple conversation. Mom giggled and talked about school. She was nostalgic for the old days, and that was a bad sign. Andy needed to keep up, so I told him to take Mom to a romantic dinner. But whatever we did, the old love kept winning. And one day, I found my dad and my mom at our house when Andy was at work. They sat and talked sweetly in the kitchen. Oh no, I never wanted to see that man again. We were losing, and we needed something to prove once and for all that Andy was better than my dad. So I came up with a new plan. I persuaded Andy to go on an extended vacation with the whole family. The longer, the better. Mom had to come to an understanding that her past love couldn't give her what Andy could. So my stepdad booked a month's vacation. My mother was very happy about this. It would be like a honeymoon. Great! For the month, she would have completely forgotten about my father, and everything should have returned to normal. But our opponent went on the offensive, and things changed before we could even leave. One day, he came to our house straight after dinner, and began to confess to my mother his infinite love. This angered Andy, and they began to quarrel violently. At one point, Andy grabbed my dad hard, and I thought there was going to be a fight. He threw Dad out, and everyone calmed down. But Dad's words made Mom start to doubt. The day of departure came, and we packed up, and we were waiting for a taxi when we heard a knock on the door. Oh no, it was my father again. But now he came to deliver an ultimatum. He said that Mom needed to make a choice. If Mom left with Andy now, she would never see my dad again. Mom stood in confusion for a minute. She looked at Dad in tears, then turned to Andy and said she couldn't go. It was the end. She made her choice, and we lost. I was so sorry that Mom and Andy got divorced. I lost my stepfather, who I loved and who loved me. Then my father came back to live with us, and it was hell from the start. I think he hated me for helping Andy, and the problem started from the beginning. And of course, my parents decided to celebrate their reunion. And Mom spent her vacation constantly partying and drinking with my dad. I was on my own the whole time, and no one was going to care a bit about me. I knew that nothing would change for the better, and perhaps this black streak would last for a very long time. All this time, the only person who was interested in my life was Andy. Despite the fact that he broke up with my mother, our relationship was still good. He became attached to me, and he was grateful that I helped him, and I felt the same way. So he offered me a plan. While the house was a mess, it was the perfect moment to call social services, and for the inspector to see that this child shouldn't be living in these conditions. Plus, Andy could provide details about the negative characteristics of my mom from work, and she could be deprived of her parental rights. I know it sounds awful, but I just couldn't keep living in this house. Sooner or later, this ship would go down because of my father, and I didn't want to be there at that time. So we carried out our plan, and Andy took custody of me. We still have a lot of paperwork and problems ahead of us, but we can handle it. I hope that my actions will show my mom that the person she loves is bad, and that we should stay away from him. In the meantime, I'm just glad that there's someone in the world who's willing to love me and take care of me like a daughter.